Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I really got to a point where I was like, nobody's talking about this, but I feel like I'm the only person that can, with enough conviction, to say I
Mm.
understand both of these worlds. I understand how we got to here through media perception, and I understand where we need to go through looking
Mm.
after our own health and being fully accountable for how we live our daily lives. And so all of those journal writings, when I spoke to other people, they were like, this is a book, you need to write it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unfiltered Voices, the podcast that is all about busting the myth that self-published is second-rate. I'm Kelly Nissen. I'm an author coach and a self-published author, and I'll be talking to authors, illustrators, and other self-published industry professionals about their choices, their journeys, and everything in between. So stick around. Today, I'm talking to the author of The 4%, Lauren Smith. Welcome to Unfiltered Voices, Lauren, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Excellent. So, a little bit about Lauren before we start. Lauren Smith is a mindfulness coach and a Pilates and yoga instructor who first made a career in Melbourne's television industry. So, it's Melbourne, Australia, where she made the decision. Oh, sorry. When she made the decision not to be vaccinated for COVID due to her incurable cranial nerve disorder, the world as she knew it turned on her. She penned her experiences, fighting for her right to maintain control of her health, in a book titled The 4%, Locked Down but Left Out During Melbourne's COVID Response. So, Lauren, your catchphrase is calm but fierce, great in a crisis. And I know you, along with many, well, all of us really, have lived through one of the world's most recent crises, but your take is quite different. And that's the topic of your book, The 4%. So, can you tell us a little bit more about your background here and, of course, about your book?
Okay. Yeah, so as you mentioned in there, I did work in television. I worked in the media in Melbourne for a very long time. I worked in television for about 15 years. I was an editor and later a producer. Even before television, I did some university magazine publications. And so I guess if you look at my background prior to doing yoga and Pilates, it was all very much about storytelling.
Mm.
So never my own story, but storytelling, images on a screen to tell the story of, I started in news. So daily news records, anything that was happening in the world at the time, they were the
Mm.
stories I started with. And then I moved into sport. And obviously, even just from doing sport, there's lots of human interest stories in those sports. So I spent a good 15 years, possibly even up to 20 years with the years before television, telling the stories of other people and, getting an emotive response from people, trying to make them feel like that this could be them as well. And so
Mm.
when I went through COVID lockdown, I wasn't working in television anymore. But if I had have decided to stay in television, I also wouldn't have been allowed to work in it because I wasn't
Yeah.
vaccinated. So for me, moving from the television industry and moving into a yoga and Pilates focus, I did a lot of mindfulness training, a lot of meditation, and I realized that being able to storytell my own story is actually beneficial for me in terms of
Mm.
dealing with issues with people, dealing with issues in society, not becoming reactive. And so I was that type of person that journaled my experiences.
Mm.
And the better I got at it, and then COVID came, I thought, this is the perfect time. I need to deal with everything that's happening here. I need to continue telling my story. So I started
Mm.
journaling what was going on in Melbourne at the time. Then it turned into what was personally happening to me. Uh, and as I spoke to different friends in different countries or different states of Australia about what was happening, I realized that not everybody was going through the same experience of COVID lockdown. COVID lockdown was
Oh,
very different in different countries. COVID lockdown was very different in different states of Australia. And
absolutely.
being able to tell my story to these friends just on the phone, they were like, you should write about this. Like, you've told stories your whole life. You should actually write about this experience. Like, this is something that affects every single person in the world. And that's,
Mm,
that's rare that you have one experience that affects everybody. And it definitely didn't affect people equally. And so I thought, this is the
mm,
chance to finally just tell my story in print about how I experienced COVID lockdown and
mm.
how people living it in the same way that I was also experienced it.
Telling your story in that way is so important because, as you said, every single person's experience was different.
Thank you.
It's not an easy thing to do when you're part of that 4%. That's a very small number of people with very limited voice, but you're giving voice to those people, which I think is really, really important. That requires a lot of bravery and gumption and determination on your part. What do I put in? What do I leave out? And actually, the process of writing memoir is mentally and emotionally draining, immensely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And it
So,
never started as a book. Like I said, I was using these little journaling ways to deal with what was happening.
mhm,
And as I started talking to some friends and telling them what was happening, if you were living in Melbourne at the time and things were happening to you, they were happening to everybody in Melbourne. And so if you kind of wanted to vent or complain about it within Melbourne, you copped a lot of flack because everyone was saying, oh, we're all doing the same thing. Like, we're all locked down 23 hours a day. We're all only allowed to leave the house for 1 hour a day. We're
yeah.
all not allowed to see our family and friends. We're all, you know, not allowed to be outside unless we're, in that 1 hour within 5 kilometers and only uh, walking either by yourself or with one other person and not being able to leave a certain space. Started talking to people outside of Melbourne, you realized that this was actually really insane in terms of lockdown. And sometimes when you
Mm,
looked at the news, you were kind of like, oh, hang on, how come there's people in the street being interviewed about this? Like, we're not even allowed in the street. But within Melbourne, you couldn't talk about it. You could be frustrated altogether about it, or you
mm,
could be angry at people who you thought weren't doing the right thing. And so it created this massive divide in Melbourne between what people thought was right and what people thought was wrong. And there was no gray area in the middle at all. So
yes.
for
Yeah.
me, I needed to process the things that I wanted to ask that I couldn't ask. I
Mm,
wanted to be like, hang on, is it healthy for us to be locked down this many hours a day? So it started as just a way to process my thoughts. It started as
mm,
stuff that I needed to write down because I was living in a house on my own. I had no contact
mm,
with anyone except, if I had one person that walked with me for that 1 hour. So when I had spoken to other friends and I'd said I'd journaled all this stuff, they were like, you need to write about it. Like, you need to speak about it. And then when the
mm,
vaccine debate came in, as you said, I had a good reason. I don't think anyone needed a good reason. I think
mm,
everyone's health is their own business. But
100%. Yeah.
I had a cranial nerve disorder that I had suffered from when I was 26 years old and had done a lot of work. I'd had surgery for it, had brain surgery for it. I had been on a lot of medication and been really unwell at various times and had worked really hard to get myself to where I was at.
Mm,
That when they came out and said everyone needed to be vaccinated, it was like, well, I actually have to think about this. And I'm
yeah.
aware that some vaccines cause neurological problems. If you do have a neurological condition, you're well aware of what does spike it and what doesn't, and what you should stay away from and what you should be looking to do more for yourself.
Mm,
And so I already knew straight away that it wasn't going to be an easy decision for me. And
mm,
at the end of the day, I was like, would I rather risk getting COVID? I'm I was probably late 30s, early 40s then. I'm not the high risk group that's going to die. But if I'm a chance of getting what I had previously, like I've lived that. I know what that feels like. I know how scary that is. I know how much of my life I lost, and I know how long it took me to get it back. So I didn't want to go back there. So I had no choice. So some people might call it brave, but I call it I have no choice.
And all that, the talk about, so and so selfish because they did this and they did that. I mean, we're always taught from a very young age, look after yourself as well. Like you should come first. And that's exactly what you've done. And I really do commend you for that. So obviously, I mean, all of that, your inspiration to write was really just for you to process it. But then to actually, when you decided, look, I actually want to try to publish this, and you sort of moved into self-publishing. Talk me through that, sort of what sort of cemented it for you, I suppose, to write it in a book format and then to go down that self-publication path.
Yep. So I think the cementing of it came by the time I'd spoken to other people and realized that our experiences were very different. And then as I started to kind of meet people who also weren't vaccinated and were struggling with trying to explain to people why they weren't. And again, not that you should have to explain, it's your own personal choice, but the media narrative was so strong about the fact that you were the worst person in the world if you didn't. And so I think in terms of cementing it, I had this moment where I was like, I've worked in the media. I have seen what the media is like when it wants to push a particular direction. I have that knowledge. Anyone can, I think for a while, in order to write it, I was thinking, I'm not a doctor, whatever. But I was like, yes, but I have so many other skills that are valid and I won't have people tell me that they're not. And I was like, I don't care that I'm not a doctor. I understand how media works. And I was like, absolutely. I think that's important. And then I was like, you know what? I moved then into a health and wellness space. I spent 13 years in that now, and I understand what happens when you can actually change people from an emotional level by getting them to move, by getting them to feel like they're giving back to themselves instead of getting them to hate on their bodies all the time. So I understand from that industry as well what it's like to actually live and breathe real health. And so I really got to a point where I was like, nobody's talking about this, but I feel like I'm the only person that can, with enough conviction, to say I understand both of these worlds. I understand how we got to here through media perception, and I understand where we need to go through looking after our own health and being fully accountable for how we live our daily lives. And so all of those journal writings, when I spoke to other people, they were like, this is a book, you need to write it. And don't worry that you're not a medical professional. You're not writing it from a medical professional's perspective. You're writing it from a person who has a medical condition. I'm also someone that, has a lot of experience about chronic pain. I need to write it from the position of someone who actually understands what they're talking about for it to seem valid for people. So I'm not just another person that wanted to write a book like about anything. I'm actually someone that was very experienced in those areas, very experienced in working with my own health to keep my health better, very experienced in teaching other people to work with their health, and also very experienced in how the media machine works. And so I just thought, if I don't do it, nobody will. And when I went down the path of working out how the best way to do it would be, I looked into how to find a publisher. I went down that route. I did a lot of research into the sorts of companies that I thought might take on a book like this. Like, it's not something everyone wanted to talk about. I was still locked down because people were just coming out of lockdown, but I was still restricted to what I wanted to do for the next 6 months because I wasn't
Mm.
vaccinated. So in terms of researching these places and ringing and speaking, like nobody was interested. And
Mm.
then I started looking down the avenue of self-publishing, but I knew I was a little bit too close to it as well, that I wasn't just going to put it straight up there without having someone else look at it. There was
Yeah.
all these legal ramifications around it as well. I was like, you know what, I need someone to help with this process. And I heavily researched different people. And I came across a person first who was an editor, but also a lawyer.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, maybe that's the avenue to go down because then she'll be able to direct me in terms of any legal ramifications I'm going to have with it.
Mm.
And I had sent her a message just saying I'd written a book, really needed someone that was both legal experienced and, etc. And she was very busy, but gave me the exact time that she could start on it, told me how much she would, be able to put into it, costs, all that sort of thing, and then said, send through your first draft. And
Mm.
then probably a week or two later, had obviously sat down to have a little bit of a look at it, and then suddenly had responded saying, oh, I'm no longer available. That is, and in my head, I nearly stopped because I was like, well, maybe from a legal perspective, this is her nice way of saying this can't be written. Like we
Yeah,
can't talk
don't do
about
it.
this.
Yeah.
And then I, asked a few friends who had done self-publishing before, who they used or people that they were aware of. And I needed someone with a slightly open mind to my topic. And a friend obviously put me on to you, Kelly.
Yes.
And we've had this discussion before, and I'm sure that
Mm.
you're not shy in, telling people now. But when I first came to you with it, you were very professional about it, but you weren't entirely sure that you agreed with my opinion. But
Mm.
you were entirely professional about it. And I guess, like anyone, there's a lot of people that still haven't read my book because they think I'm just going to ram it down their throat that they were wrong. But it's
Yeah,
not written like that at all, as you know.
not at all.
And it's
Yeah.
actually not just written for me, which is how through this process, I was like, this has been a healing experience for me, but I need to add journaling pages into this because
Yeah.
if nothing else, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened collectively to the entire world in terms of an event.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And people aren't dealing with it. They'll read my story and they might just feel guilty or they might just feel shitty or they don't believe me or whatever. But
Mm.
it's about reading my perspective, but then telling their own. So that's why I added journaling pages to it.
Yeah,
And so the book
absolutely.
was, I need you to step a little bit more into the middle to understand why I made the choice that I made. But I'm willing to also give you the chance to explain why you were so hard against it or why you agreed with me,
Mm.
or there'll be different people that read it. And it's a book that when people read it in 5 years' time, they might think completely different, which is why I've given them the chance to journal. I'm not living in Melbourne now, and the book is part of the reason why I'm not living in Melbourne, not because I've written it, but because
Mm.
um, everything that happened to me meant that I never felt comfortable in Melbourne anymore. But
Yeah.
seeing what's happening there now, it's just festering. Nobody has dealt with anything. Nobody is willing to come to middle ground. Everyone is either right or wrong. And
Yeah.
so if you think you've moved on from COVID, fine, maybe you have, but think about things that are happening in the world at the moment and this very black and white view that we have of them and this
Mm.
huge amount of aggression, unprocessed emotion that is filtering through, especially Melbourne, lots of other
Mm.
countries, and that sort of situation as well. All of that is because people were not allowed to speak about how they felt, not just about
Yes.
COVID, about other things. People were not allowed, they were just shut down every time they tried to speak. I've never once told people that they did the wrong thing. I just
No.
need them to understand that they did what they felt they needed to with the information that they had at a particular time based on feelings that they were
Yes.
experiencing. They were
Yes.
scared
And
and they
yeah.
need to deal with the fact that they were scared. And because they were scared, they might have acted out and reacted in a way that they shouldn't have.
Mm.
They might have friendships that they're no longer friends with because of that. They might,
Yes.
there might be situations there they're no longer comfortable in and they still haven't dealt with it because
Mm.
they need to talk about it.
So the whole self-publishing process, um, it's a massive, as you would know, it's this huge
Yeah.
learning curve, and it's different every time. And there's, things that you might think now, oh, I would have done that differently, or things that you didn't know when you first started. So my question is, so for you, you've been through this process, you've been through the ups and downs. There's still things to learn, like when it comes to marketing and that sort of thing. It's like,
Oh,
oh
yeah.
my God, what do we do? What advice would you give to any aspiring writer who's not only unsure about self-publishing, but sort of worried perhaps about how their book might be perceived if
Yep.
it's self-published?
There's definitely a stigma that shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
I know that people often think self-publishing means I've written it, I've banged it straight up on Amazon, nobody's checked it,
Mm,
etc. For
yeah.
me, obviously, I hired a professional editor who went through it, who fixed all of my grammatical mistakes. I was a visual editor, yeah. I wasn't a print editor. So I quite often I will tell a story like I speak, which is very small country town Lauren, who sounds sometimes like she's not very highly educated. So I needed someone to go through and correct my grammar, my spelling mistakes, all sorts of stuff. So I hired editing services. I hired coaching services. I then hired a graphic designer to. I gave her the idea for the cover, and she put together in like a little collaborative process. We came up with what it is. Which, for those of you who don't realize, there is definitely a grey strip down the middle, and one half of the book is black and one half of the book is white, and that is very deliberate because I want people to come together in the middle. And then she also designed the actual, and this is probably the bit I didn't think about as much. She designed
Mm,
the actual inside of the book. So what my chapters looked like, whether they started on insides of page or brand new pages, what the fonts were. So there were all these things that I didn't really think about. I got asked to pick fonts, I got asked to pick pages colors, and I got asked all these things. But basically, I hired two professionals to do all that stuff for me. So
mm,
it's not like I came to it going, I'm just written something and then I've put it straight on Amazon, and the writing's out of the page margins and the book doesn't look pretty, and like I've
mm.
actually produced a book that can sit on a shelf and sell. Um, it looks good to touch and to hold and to feel,
Yes.
and grammatically it's correct, and it was proofread probably 700 times by me because I'm such a perfectionist. But
Oh, it's always
that's
the way.
self-publishing is not just, going, hey, I've drawn a stick figure and now I'm going to sell it. Like it, there can be an expensive and B, a very like long
Mm,
process of going about it. It's a really long process when it's the first time you're ever doing it and you're not really sure, which is why I hired a bunch of professionals to help me. Like I actually
mm,
spent the money to make it look as published like as a proper book as it could be.
mm. And it is
Um,
a proper book.
yeah, it
So,
is a proper book.
yeah,
That's it. So,
100% it's
and
a
that's the
proper
thing.
book,
I need to stop saying that as well. Like, because people are like, oh, you self-published. And it's like, yeah, but it's been professionally edited. It's been
Yeah.
professionally graphic designer. It's been professionally published per se, even though it's under my own name.
Mm,
Um, and that process is long and arduous and costs money. And then when people want you to give them your book for free, it's like, I spent a lot of money doing this. And it's like, if you want to know my story, yes, I want you to purchase it. I don't want you to
mm.
borrow it from 600 different people. But,
Yes.
at the same time, it's also a story that I think is important to read. So if people have read it because they've simply borrowed it off someone, fine.
Mm,
I'll let that go, but really just buy somebody's book, like purchase somebody's book, even if it is
yes.
self-published. There's a lot that's gone into it. So it's
And
a
I think,
learning curve. It's stressful. It is so much better when you let other people look at it. I don't think anyone should ever just put something straight up without having someone else like go over it for them. The marketing side is probably the hardest.
Oh,
And when you write a book that's deemed controversial, which I still have trouble accepting because it is just me having written my story,
yeah.
I don't know how a memoir can be controversial. Like,
Mm,
it's true.
yes.
Everything said in it is true. In the bits that don't, that haven't come directly from my mouth, bits that have come from the government or the media have been proven, footnoted, and
Mm,
accurately recorded. And so when think of people kind of just being like, oh, she just self-published a book, she just chucked it up there, like, no,
yeah.
so much went into it, and so much went into it that it was as good as it could possibly be. And if I hadn't have done it that way, it probably wouldn't exist,
Mm,
because not only were there people who didn't want to work on it, didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to, have anything to do with it. It still hasn't sold anywhere near as much as I would like it to. I'm happy with what it has done. Word
mm,
of mouth marketing has been the best for me.
yeah.
But I tried to do paid ads on Facebook, Instagram. It was shut down for misinformation. So I had to actually take a step back from trying to force it to be advertised. So I tried to
Yeah.
give it a lot more momentum, and it just, like, I just became trapped in not being able to advertise it. So I sometimes worry that I feel like I've let it go, and I am just
Mm,
letting it be out in the ether. And if it continues to sell, it continues. And if it doesn't, then that's fine. But I don't know. There's inside me, I feel like I want to give it another push in advertising it properly and being able to get it out there. Like, it's a book that I
mm,
think eventually over time they should probably read in schools, especially schools in Melbourne. Like, that would be
mm.
my ultimate goal, to have it read as curriculum in a school of this
Yes,
is
100%.
what people experienced. And it gives
Mm.
them, we're talking about kids' mental health. It gives them the chance to talk about how they felt at the time.
It is difficult for most self-published authors to get traction with marketing. You've just gone next level with that because of your subject matter and the so-called, and for want of a better word, the controversial nature. And I don't get that either. It's your story,
Yeah,
that's it. And so I just want to emphasize that for people who are thinking of self-publishing out there, yes, it is. There's a lot of work that needs to go into producing that final product. There's a lot of money that is sunk into that. You need to believe in yourself. Yes, marketing is probably the most difficult aspect of things. You've got to be prepared to do the hard yards. Um, for most people, it's difficult, but not as difficult as it has been for you, Lauren. You were writing to heal and that sort of thing. And that there are definitely, a lot of people say with Memoir, there are definitely therapeutic benefits to telling your story, to getting it out there, and that sort of thing. Would you agree with that? That for you with this particular book, that there have been benefits for you for the
absolutely.
story.
I Before I published it, and even just as I was leaving Melbourne to move here, I was literally a shell of a person. Like, I
Mm,
will easily say that now. I felt like I couldn't be me in my own home, in my own area, in my own state. I was
mm,
really confused about where I was going to go from here, because I was still. So some of those restrictions to people that were unvaccinated obviously affect employment that I was allowed to do and wasn't allowed to do.
absolutely,
And
yeah.
I left Australia at the end of 2023. And it wasn't until the middle of 2023 that they actually really got rid of restrictions, and I was allowed to start teaching Pilates and yoga at studios in Melbourne. Like, up until the middle
Mm,
of 2023, I still wasn't allowed to do it.
yeah.
And I definitely didn't reopen my business. And so by the time I left Melbourne, like, I was so ready to leave Melbourne because I was over it. And I was still, if I had been in a car accident or something like that, I was still not allowed to be on an organ donor registry because I was unvaccinated for COVID. And I sort of thought, well, why am I living here?
Mm,
So when I left Australia, there was very, like, angry and bitter and sad. And, I had stepped away from a lot of people as well. And I was in the middle of writing the book. I think I finished completely. I remember on the 31st of December that year, I wanted it gone. Like I'd moved to Thailand, I'd been living in Thailand for 2 weeks, and you'd set me a deadline of getting 5 questions, that you needed to add to the story finished. And I was like, this has
Mm.
to be done this year, like the end
Yeah.
of 2023. I want this to be out of my life. I've moved countries. I want to start afresh 2024. I don't want
Mhm.
this to be part of it anymore. And then it obviously got published in May of 2024 because it takes time, obviously, graphic
Yeah.
designer, publishing, structure, and all that sort of stuff. So the actual physical written stuff was finished right at the end of 2023, right when
Mm.
my entire life was changing. And then that 6 months of rereading it a few times, yeah, I probably didn't have the greatest start to being in Thailand because I reread my own story so many times, and I probably
Yes.
socialized as much as I should have the first 6 months that I was here because I was just in this headspace of this needs to be published now. Like I need to get it out because you get to that stage where you're like, I've now written it and
Yeah.
I've gotten it off my chest and it feels amazing, but I need other people to read it. I need other people to understand. And so once it was published, like I just felt this weight lift off my shoulders. Like the rest of 2024 was great. 2025's been amazing. Like
Mm.
there's so much. I've still not returned to Melbourne. Like it's been nearly 2 years of living here, and I don't have any plans to return to Melbourne to even visit people at this stage. But
Mm.
I don't know. It moved so much in me, feelings that I just couldn't move in any other way. Like
Yeah.
burying them down would not have fixed it. And by the
Mm.
time I published it and I was living my new life and, I'd gotten out everything I needed to say, like it just made such a big difference.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot easier. I know that I have probably taken away the fact that I could have released it whilst I lived in Melbourne and had the
Mm.
opportunity to hand deliver it to people and really get them to I probably would have sold more maybe because I could have traveled around and dropped it off to people if I couldn't market.
So hard to tell.
And so, yeah, living in Thailand, it's been so much easier to feel proud and happy about it. There's people here that have supported me with it. There's people here that have bought it and been like, oh, great job, blah, blah, blah. There's been a lot of people back in Australia who have also bought it and said, oh my God, great job. A lot of
Hmm.
them live in country areas. In Melbourne, there's been a smaller percentage of people who have read it and gone, you've done really well. And again, they're the people who always support you. They're your friends who always support you. And it's filtered through people, I'm sure, that I'm not aware of that have read it. But it made such a difference just getting it out there. And like I said, I put it in line with me completely moving and changing my life as well. And it's just been really well received. I haven't had anyone that's told me it's bullshit and hated it or whatever, but I have
Mm.
definitely had a lot of people that I know are uncomfortable about the topic still tell me, "Oh, I haven't had a chance to read it." And
Yeah.
I understand that. I understand. There was also a few people who have read it but didn't purchase it and didn't want me to know that they had read it
Oh,
because they were some of those people that were very against it and they didn't want to be seen to be supporting it. You just have to get to the stage where you're like, it does what it does. If it sells a million copies, it sells a million copies. If it sells 2 copies, it sells 2 copies. Like
yeah.
it's obviously sold more than 2 copies, don't worry. But I have gotten out what I've needed to say. It has changed my life saying it. It has
Mm.
made me feel so much more comfortable by having a lot of people message and go, it was really well written. Um, People were very honest as well. They were like, oh, I thought it was going to be a real anti-vax book, and it's actually not. It's really well done. I've
Yes.
had people who were journalists and former journalists who still work in the media who have like, this is actually brilliant, but I can't publicize it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that changes. And some people have told me that. They've gone, oh, I've read your book, but I can't, like, I know I've got a big following, but I can't actually.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been that ability to get it out as much as I'd like. But
Yeah.
I will get back to working out how to do it. Any of your viewers or listeners who want to give me some very good advice on the best way to advertise it and let people know it's out there. People with massive followings that
Mm.
want to read it and then promote it, get in contact with me.
Yeah,
I think everyone should tell their own story. It's
yeah,
therapeutic.
yeah.
I think we underestimate not saying what we feel, like how
Oh,
important it is.
it
And I
is.
think the more the world goes into chaos, the more you can see that there is a lot of people who don't get a chance to actually express. No one's allowed to ask questions anymore. And even in like the
Mm,
rise of AI, we're asking and getting one response, which is an AI generated response. Like that
yeah.
generated response is coming from whatever the narrative is supposed to be of the time. So we're
Yeah,
losing this
absolutely.
critical thinking. We're losing this ability to understand that your neighbor may be completely different to you, but they're still a human being and they deserve
Mm,
respect and they
yeah.
have a story. And if you reach in and try and find people's stories before you judge them, you might think a lot
Hmm.
differently about them and the world might actually spin a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that. That is absolutely like a brilliant thought to finish on. I think the world now, certainly my world is it's looking pretty dire, but I think it's really important that we just keep pushing that narrative. Share your story because
Yeah.
somewhere out there there will be people who listen, and it might be hard to get them to listen, but there are people who will listen. So it's absolutely valuable, if not just for yourself, but for other people. Somebody will pick up your book and will go, I wish I'd said that.
Yeah.
That was me, and they'll feel that connection. And I think that's really important there as well. Um, so just a couple of questions there. You have done so much. Like you've kicked a lot of goals, and it's been hard slog. What's one thing or one milestone that you would like to reach as an author that you're still striving towards?
I think I might have touched on it before. This book, not talking myself up, but it needs to be in schools. Like it needs to be
Yes, yeah.
studied. It needs to be, and I mean, you're a former teacher, and I think you
Mm,
even said the importance of, making people read this. Like it's not a hard read.
it's not,
Like I
no.
said, I'm a small country town girl at the end. I don't use big words. Um, and so it's not a hard read. It's dissected, very much into a section on what happened, a section on what the rules were, a section on what my part of this was, and then a
Yeah.
section of lessons about what did we learn from this.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe that's, I mean, as an author, am I ever going to write anything else? Who knows? It's like when I suppose people say they have a baby and they go through so much pain and they never want to do it again. And then they forget because they then want another one. Like, I
Yes.
remember the pain it was to write this as a
Mm,
complete outsider, knowing that so many people were probably going to turn on me after I wrote it, but knowing that I needed to write it for myself. So,
yeah.
I don't I don't know if I have another book in me. Maybe I do. But I think firstly, it obviously needs to sell a lot more than it has. It needs to reach a lot more people. But I
Mm,
really think that it needs to be in curriculum somewhere one day. Like
yeah.
it is a memoir, yes, but it's going to end up being a historical
It is. It
book.
is. It's a window on a
Yeah.
period of time that a lot of people think they know about, but they don't.
Yes.
And
And a lot of people know about it, but from their own perspective. There were so many things I could have added to it. There were so many other people's stories that I could have
mm,
added to it. I saw things that were happening to other people. I had a few people at the time message me and be like, oh, this is what's happening to me, blah, 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 blah. And I could have told those stories in it as well, but I
mm,
chose to make it, most digestible for people and the most honest. I didn't want to involve other people. I know that
mm,
sounds a little bit selfish, like I'm the only person that went through COVID lockdown, but I wanted to be able to put it out there and say, this is
mm,
100% true. I have
yeah.
lived through this exact experience,
Mm,
and I don't want to tarnish it by adding snippets of someone I've met online telling me that this happened to
yeah.
them in case it didn't actually happen. So, as as selfish as it sounds to say, I want you to read my book about my own personal story in lockdown.
Mm,
Um, I did it that way so that it is accurate, it is truthful, which is why the
yeah.
marketing of it being misinformation really hurt because I was like, I've done everything I can to actually, I even have my own doctor has written a letter, which is in the book, to say that she fully supported, and not just doctor, my neurologist. My neurologist fully supported me. She said the choice was always mine and it was always her job to tell me what the pros and cons were, but she fully supported that my choice was no.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I can't do any more than that. I want people to understand that this is an accurate reflection of exactly what happened to somebody who chose to not be vaccinated. And it is possibly, one of a few books that will be written from a person there's only 4% of us, from the person in Melbourne. There might be a lot of people writing about what we did do to the unvaccinated, but this is me. I am one of those people. And there are very few of us within that 4% who have probably written and published about it.
Go in with an open mind. You might learn something, you might resonate with something. You might have your perspective broadened or changed or whatever, but it is so important to go in with that open mind, because I can guarantee that there's nothing in that book. I think it's great that you didn't muddy the waters of your story with hearsay and with other people's stories. You have a very clear, direct message. It's an important book. I 100% agree with you that it needs to be in the curriculum somewhere. Actually, I can think of a number of places it could fit into the curriculum.
Thank you. That's good coming from a teacher.
Yes. So just before we sign off, just can you let people know where can people get in touch with you to find out about your podcast, but also, where can they buy your book?
In terms of websites, if they head to the4percentbook.com. Now, in terms of that, it's all words, it's all letters, there's no numbers. So the 4percentbook.com, so spelt out. That is the website. On there are 3 options. There's, if you are an Australian, to purchase it and have it mailed to you in Australia. There's still a few copies of it left that way. There is a option if you are international, to purchase it through Amazon internationally. And there is also the possibility to purchase an ebook copy. So they're all on that, the4percentbook.com.
Yep.
I have an Instagram. Now, I haven't done a lot with it recently, and this is where I was trying to get my my own podcast up, and that is the 4%_book, again, all written in letters, the 4%_book. So that's Instagram. With the podcast that you mentioned, I obviously told my story in my book. I want to now tell the story of others. And I wanted to schedule this podcast that the first group of people I wanted to talk to were other people in the 4% in Australia. After that, I want to move into people who are possibly unvaccinated in other countries, people, just their experiences of lockdown in other countries as well. Then I wanted to look at people who have changed their mind about what they thought of this time. So these are all the things that I want to bring into this podcast. Because I've decided to start with people in that 4%, the podcast hasn't got off the ground yet, because and maybe I need to go ahead and just interview other people first, because I have other people that I can interview that are vaccinated, but they've either changed their mind or they live in different countries or all that sort of stuff. But trying to find that 4% of people in Australia who aren't vaccinated, and I do know quite a few, that actually want to talk on a podcast about their experience, is been so challenging. And I totally get it. I've spoken to a few who are like, I just got my life back and I'm not ready to, like, I've just got friends back. I've just got my job back. I'm not ready to rock the boat again.
Yeah.
I know that I have the freedom to rock the boat because I work for myself. I live in another country. It's much easier for me. So I know that I probably said a year ago now that I was doing a podcast, but it's been so hard to find anybody that wants to talk about it. I'd love to start with someone from Melbourne, but that has almost seemed like an impossible task. I know that there are definitely people in Melbourne who are unvaccinated and have opinions about this, but they don't want to talk in a podcast. So hopefully over time, if you stay across the website or the Instagram, hopefully over time, yes, there will start being some episodes of the 4% podcast.
I wish you all the best with that, and thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you.
Let's get this book out there, get the podcast happening. Open your minds, tell your story, listen to other people's stories, basically, is that message. Thank you so much, Lauren.
No worries. Thank you.